First, let me thank you, Senator Paul, for coming on the Sarah Carter Show. This is the first time you've been on the show, and I have been wanting to get you on for some time now. I think now is the best time, though. You have been avidly outspoken about this ridiculous trillions of dollars spending bill and what's happening in Washington, D.C. I wanted to ask you, what would be the impact on our liberty, in your opinion, if the Democrats get what they want with this spending bill?
This spending bill will spend more than $1 billion per page. So this is an enormous, something we've never ever seen, unprecedented amount of spending, but also an unprecedented amount of borrowing. So we're approaching a $30 trillion national debt. We borrow more than a couple of $1 million every minute. And there are ramifications to all that borrowing. Basically, the Federal Reserve finances this by creating new money. It floods the marketplace and causes your prices to rise. So ultimately, this is a bait and switch. This is sort of Democrats saying, hey, free college, free daycare, won't cost you anything. But what they don't tell you is the price of gas is going up, the price of your groceries is going up. And ultimately, you pay for this by higher prices. You pay for this through inflation.
Right. Extraordinary inflation. Senator Chuck Schumer, is trying to cast the blame on almost on everything on the Republicans. He's like, hey, you guys promised last year, through the COVID spending package, you said that we were going to be able to take care of this. And now you want to back away. How do you respond to that? What do you say to Schumer and these allegations that he's trying to put everything with regard to the spending bill on the Republicans?
Well, there is blame to go around. I'd be the first to admit that there are big government Republicans that should share in some of the blame, particularly for last year's deficit. Last year was largely both parties, other than a few conservatives in the House and a few conservative Republicans like myself in the Senate, who wasn't and did not get on record as being for all of this pandemic sort of largesse that was passed out. All of it was borrowed. But both parties do deserve blame for this in the long run. This year, it's primarily been Democrats, though. There's been a $2 trillion new COVID package. Primarily Democrats voted for that. Then there was an infrastructure package, primarily voted on by Democrats. And now there's another several $1 trillion package. In the end, we might borrow $5 to $6 trillion this year. But even before we got involved with all the COVID money, we were already borrowing $1 trillion every year just for the normal expenses. And both parties do deserve blame for that. But we have to talk to the American people, because I think we're in the process of getting to the point where we might even destroy the currency. I don't want us to become Venezuela. I don't want the currency to be worthless. And when our currency becomes worthless, it means chaos for the world, because much of the world actually uses the dollar in their day-to-day transactions.
Senator, I'm in total agreement with you. I see this as a national security issue for our country, an economic national security issue for our country if we don't fix it. Much worse than what people had talked about in the past. We're never going to be able to pay back. We're going to eliminate Social Security. But with inflation, with what we see happening in the world, especially with enemy states and actors, our economy being shattered is literally a possibility now. And some of those provisions in the bill, I have a lot of problems with the bill itself, but what are some of the most, egregious provisions in the bill that you have?
Well, one of the things that's most talked about and most complained about when I'm home, every town hall meeting, someone comes up to me and says, if I have $600 in my bank account, the federal government's going to snoop through all of my transactions and try to squeeze more taxes out of me. The fact that they're going to spend $10 billion hiring new IRS agents. If the government wants more revenue, we typically get more revenue when we have fair taxes. When taxes are low, when rates are flat, you tend to actually get more compliance. But when you hire more IRS agents to squeeze us, and when you say we're going to look at every transaction in your bank account, people are thinking, gosh, this is more Big Brother than I want. And so that's the number one thing people are unhappy with. They're also talking about that if I own or inherit a farm that I got from my grandfather that used to be worth $10,000 and it's now worth $1 million, we're not selling the farm, we're not realizing any gain, but you're going to tell me somehow just by inheriting it that now I have to pay a taxes on $1 million farm. That kind of stuff scares people to death that are in family-run businesses.
Because none of this is for free. And I think you're one of the few people, especially on the Republican side, who has been a staunch advocate for civil liberties. You've been relentless. You've been fighting even Republican colleagues on it. And we see what's happening now, especially with the provisions to expand the IRS. We saw what happened under the Obama administration with the Tea Party and with other groups. And now we're seeing what can happen now potentially with us as I mean, one of the big jokes is like, why should the administration know every single thing about our life? Why should they be vested in every single aspect of our life? I mean, that's not the role of the federal government. Do you find it difficult in this day and age, especially post 9/11? I'm talking all the way from 9/11 on, to really get colleagues to understand that, I guess, fear is not worth selling out your civil liberties?
Well, I think what you find is anytime there's a crisis, Rahm Emanuel put it well, let no crisis be wasted. Big government, grows its role in your life during a crisis, whether that be a war, a real war, or a decades-long war on terror, or whether it be the pandemic. Out of each of these different crises, government grows in control of your life. And I think it's become pretty clear to people, particularly as we have more and more mandates, either through work or employment, on being vaccinated, wearing masks, all of the things they're mandating on us. It shows they really aren't too concerned with our own personal freedom. We knew the Democrats wanted to control our economic life, but now we know they want to control our medical life or our personal freedom. You're finding people like Jonathan Isaac, I think, had some interviews that I've watched recently, the Orlando Magic player, the NBA player, who says, look, I'm 23, I already had COVID.
Right.
A study out of Israel said that 2.5 million people they looked at, that people who had gotten the disease naturally were protected 7 times greater from being in the hospital or dying. Why doesn't he have a right to make a decision? Why doesn't a nurse or a doctor that's already had COVID have the right to make a decision that they already have immunity and they don't really feel like getting the vaccine? So there's a lot of this stuff that's coming, and the question is, will it ever go away? On the spending front, most of these things are going to be entitlements. Entitlement spending, once it comes, never goes away. So I do worry about this. We have to fight back. We'll fight through the electoral process in 2022.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, we've got to try to stop them, as best we can, with not having the numbers in the majority now.
You think you'll be able to do it? You think they'll be able to stop it? I mean, fundamentally, this spending bill could change our nation. The way it really, truly is a radical spending bill.
We're going to do everything we can to stop it, but the numbers in the Senate are tied,
Right.
50-50. And so some of what happens depends on 2 Democrats, Sinema and Manchin, who have been pushing back. What they're pushing for is half as bad, but still as bad. They're pushing for another $1.5 trillion in spending as opposed to 3.5. But you can say, gosh, that's a lot better than 3.5. But another $1.5 trillion also will lead to inflation, will lead to massive increase in debt, and isn't good for the country.
I agree with you.
The bill also is going to raise taxes on businesses, investors, and really the Joint Tax Committee just came out and said, really people making $25,000 to $50,000, people making $50,000 to $75,000 are going to have increased taxes because of this. We've also discovered that there's a new welfare program through a refundable child tax credit that will actually go to illegal aliens as well, that you don't even have to be in the country legally to apply for this new welfare program. These are all real problems.
Those are huge problems, massive problems. And I know because I'm down at the border and I know the situation there. It's like there isn't a place you can't turn right now in the country where something is not at least at critical mass, I feel. One of the, you mentioned cinema, and one of the issues that I've, know a lot of people are concerned about is, personal safety of lawmakers. I know you experienced it. I actually lived right down the street from the ball field the day that the gunman opened fire on the Republican baseball team. It was horrific. It was a terrifying situation for everyone involved. Now we're seeing what happened with Senator Sinema, being harassed in the restroom and being followed around. Are you worried about maybe the political atmosphere right now, what that's done to the country? Any concerns on your part with the safety of lawmakers?
Without question, we now have security 24/7, protecting myself, my wife, my family. People being chased into the bathroom. I mean, for goodness sakes, do we not have local laws that say you can't film people in a bathroom? That woman ought to be arrested that chased Sinema into the bathroom. That's not proper discourse. It should be against the law. I'm not for a lot of laws, but taking pictures of people in the bathroom is a law I'm for. I mean, that's crazy. But chasing people down in the streets after they did, like at the Republican National Convention, where people were being beaten and pushed to the street, we would have lost our life that night had it not been for law enforcement. But the thing people need to remember is they want to make it all about race. The people who attacked us were predominantly black, but the people who saved our lives, the police officers, were also predominantly black. This isn't about race. It's about right and wrong, and it's about law and order. The idea of people saying we should no longer have police in our country, they saying defund the police, that is such a bizarre idea that it should be hooted and hollered and laughed out of polite society.
It really should, Senator. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm here. I moved to Texas. I love this state. I love the great state of Texas. But right now in Austin, there's a huge problem. There's the Open Society Foundation has invested over $500,000 in fighting the Austin Police Department to expand its police force and be able to protect the community. It boggles the mind. I don't really understand. I think I kind of do the purpose behind it, but it's almost like there's a fundamental breakdown in, regardless of whether it's law and order, whether it's civil liberties, everything feels like it's upside down on its head. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just me.
I think there's going to be a backlash. I'm going to have to finish with this question because I'm being called to the floor to vote.
Okay.
But I will say I think there's going to be a backlash. Even in Austin, we read recently that a majority of people in Austin voted no longer to let people just camp out in the city in tents, homeless people
Right.
just to live anywhere. The majority of Austin folks, and Austin's known as a liberal city, said no more on this. I think the majority of people in 2022 are going to say, we don't want people in charge of our government who don't think we should have any police. I think there's going to be Democrats. I think there's going to be suburban moms. I think there's going to be independents who say, we're not voting for a party that says we shouldn't have any police, because that's a bizarre idea. We're not going to vote for parties that say the homeless should live everywhere on people's front lawns, in front of their businesses. I think there are going to be people responding and saying we want, our civilization back. We want some law and order. We want some decorum in our cities. So I think there's going to be a big backlash. We have to survive till then.
Right.
We're going to fight the good fight. And I do appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much, Senator. I really appreciate you being here. I'm sure people will take your advice. Remember that, you guys. I mean, this is all about elections. It's about us being in charge of our own future. They work for us, right? We don't work for them. So thank you so much, Senator, for being a part of the show. I really appreciate it. Hope you come back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.